Hi, and welcome back to Plan 9 Crunch. He's Doug Gibson, I'm Joe Gibson,
Hi.
and today we're going to talk about Gamera the Brave because it's celebrating its anniversary, kind of. This is a day off from the actual anniversary, but close enough. So, Gamera the Brave is the 12th Gamera movie from 2006. Well, the Godzilla movies are more easily divisible into three categories of like Showa, Heisei, Millennium. Millennium was sort of an erroneous thing since Heisei was still the era up until it switched to Reiwa, which is the more modern stuff in Godzilla classification. This is all relevant because there is a Showa series of 8 Gamera movies that all share the same themes and the same creative team. But then the Heisei trilogy had its own creative vision and creative team, and now we have one film in 2006, which is after Godzilla's Millennium series ended, but still in Heisei. So it's grouped in Heisei, but really it's different. It's returning more to the Showa sensibilities of Noriaki Yuasa, and that's because of director Ryuta Tazaki, who we might talk more in blog post or even later in this video possibly about his creative inputs here compared to others. But first of all, that's why the movie is the way it is. It's harkening back to the Showa series. Anything you want to start off with?
Well, it is an attempt to bring it back to Gamera being the friend of children, right?
Yes.
And it starts out rather I thought it was interesting how Gamera sacrifices his life to save all the people in I guess they call it the opening scene or something. And
Cold open.
yeah,
Prologue.
and then we jump ahead like 36, 35 years, right?
33 years.
33.
So we're starting in 1973, and within the timeline of this movie, I guess some version of maybe some of the events of the Showa series took place, though probably not. Gyaos is a horde monster here, which is only true of Heisei. But kaiju exists, people know about it, and they were attacking in the 60s and 70s. Is the implication of people knowing about Gamera, there being a task force and all this stuff. But yes, in 1973, Gamera sacrifices his life to take out 3 of the last 4 Gyaos. He downed the other one right before the sacrifice. It's witnessed by I forget the actual name. It starts with a K as the first name, but Aizawa is the surname, I should say, versus given name. And he becomes the father of the actual lead, Toru Aizawa, because there's a 33-year time skip, at which point they are mourning
The death of his mother and his wife, right?
yes, the death of Toru's mother and the father's wife. Toru starts this off not believing in an afterlife, and that's interesting for his character.
That was interesting, that scene, excuse me.
Yes. So he sees a blinking light in the distance. He goes and finds an egg, and this egg turns out to be Gamera. So he takes the egg home and tries to raise it. This is a boy and his turtle movie, and there's a few Gamera movies that fit that.
Gamera, the turtle, is so cute at the beginning.
They had, 12, 13 actual turtles that they painted the logo on the chest on in order to paint a film with those turtles.
Why is the little boy the only one who sees the light? Is there any kind of mysticism there?
Possibly, but we'll get into this a lot more. But part of the main ideas of Yuasa's movies and this movie is that kids inherently know. They know what they need to do for Gamera. They know what Gamera needs to do. In these movies, the kids always understand that better than anybody. And that goes back to Yuasa. It's being carried forward by the new director. So in terms of a boy and his turtle movie, the original Gamera movie, it's a weird movie. It's split between 2 plot lines, one of which is more serious about trying to stop the turtle, and the other this one random sociopathic kid who thinks that his turtle that he let go turned into Gamera. It didn't, so it catches him from the lighthouse, and from that point on, Gamera has a shred of humanity, but he's still the villain. That's because you also wanted a more child-friendly icon, but the studio wanted a darker movie. So, very weird mishmash. In that case, the boy was wrong that his turtle became Gamera. The next boy and his turtle thing is Gamera Super Monster, where it's kind of unclear whether or not the turtle is Gamera. I think it's supposed to be implied that the space women turn the boy's turtle into Gamera, but it could just as easily be that Gamera existed somewhere off and was summoned at that moment. Whatever, it doesn't really matter. Super Monster is a movie that I respect more than most people, but maybe not too much. No, I'm kidding. Then we eventually get to Gamera Rebirth, which draws a lot from this movie. It has them discover Gamera, or something that resembles Gamera. It's ambiguous, as a young turtle, and then he becomes the large thing here. So in this movie, he doesn't want Gamera to be... Sorry, he doesn't want the turtle to be Gamera. He names the turtle Toto, which will be important in a second. This is a really good movie. I'm trying to present it in a way that makes sense, but the best way to consume this is to watch it. Because you remember what Toru's mother called him, right?
Toto.
Toto, yeah. So that's why.
And there's that
he calls him
flashback scene.
Yeah, the flashback scene.
Yeah. You know, there's also a young girl. She looks to be older than him, who is in danger of dying of a disease or something. And
Mai
there's
is her name.
Motif.
Yeah, motif.
I just can't see that. It seems to resemblance to the wife of some sort, although she died, you know.
There's a lot to talk about in this. I'm pretty sure they're neighbors. They're neighbors, and the families are friends. So there's a scene where the father talks about the dead wife to Mai's father, and Mai's mother is also in scenes. There's interactions because those characters are ones of faith that do believe that there is an afterlife, where the mother is looking down upon Toru and all that stuff. And Toru is the one that doesn't believe. It's not that big of a focus, but it is important for a payoff later on. In any case, Toru brings the turtle home, and it's a very cute turtle. It's very endearing, but very quickly the turtle starts to fly.
Yeah.
And also breathe fire. And how do you keep that hidden? For a little bit, the movie is this slice of life thing about keeping a pet from your father in your room. And he's not allowed to have the pet because they're operating a restaurant out of the lower level of their house.
Made me want to have some fried rice. That's why I asked
Yeah.
my mom to make some.
There's this very whimsical scene of Toru at a skate park with his friends. He has two male friends. They're not too well developed, but it is the connection that Toru has and how he interacts with them.
I kind of think of those three as the A-team.
Yeah. It's the connections that Toru has with these other kids and with the adults that clarifies his character. It's not like Gamera Rebirth, where the friend group is actually, they are all fleshed out to pretty well degrees. It's more that Toru is the personality to focus on, and maybe Mai, because she has some important scenes as well. But the two boys are just sort of interchangeable together, bound at the hip. Sort of like a Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, if anyone gets that reference. But
Yeah.
there's a scene where he's at the skate park with his friends, and at the same time, Gamera, the baby Toto Gamera, is mimicking the choreography, going down the stairs. He's in the kitchen. Remember, the dad slips on him and
Yeah.
puts him underneath the pot. Gamera is flying around. The dad swats him out of the air unexpectedly, so he swirls in and out of the bowl, which is very whimsical. Did you catch the reference to a Gamera monster that happened in that scene?
No, he told me what it is.
You remember when the knife falls down?
Yes.
The knife falls down at an angle, menacing Toto. That's supposed to be a reference to Giron, the knife-headed monster.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So he breathes fire at it naturally. And the dad's surprised to see burn marks on the knife. Anything you want to talk about these scenes before we get into Zedus?
Well, it's just that I want to talk about what is it, like the little, he gives the girl to make her stronger?
Yes.
We probably want to talk about that later, don't you?
We can bring it up now.
Okay.
So Gamera he sacrifices himself in the backstory, intro, cold open, prologue in 1973, and this explicitly creates this kind of red pearl that then dominates the market. So Gamera saves the economy as well as the people. That's very interesting. But anyway, a much larger version of this jewel is found underneath the egg, and there's a certain energy. It's said implicitly, and I watched the dub for this. I don't know if they said it explicitly in the original Japanese. I don't remember this line anyways, until I saw it in the dub. But one of the people studying Gamera later in the movie says that the pearls, Gamera needs them in order to have his power. It's easy enough to glean that he needs that energy, especially as a baby and a newborn, in order to become fully Gamera. But so it's there with the egg. Nothing would be wrong except that it's a good luck charm is how it's being marketed. So when Toru finds out about Mai's impending surgery, he does give her the much larger thing, and so much of the third act is about getting that back to Gamera so he can get his powers to fight Zedus. Okay, so Zedus is the monster in this movie. Do you have any first impressions you want to share about Zedus?
Well, tell us more about Zedus, because You know more about this and what impact it had on the Gamera series and things.
Well, first describe Zedus for a second, just so we can get a sense of what he is, you know?
You describe better than me, okay?
Okay. He's this bipedal, very spiky, shaggy kind of dinosaur-looking thing. He also can have frills pop out of his head, and he has a tongue that can stab out, sort of like Bargon. He was going to be a quadrupedal monster, but they decided to make him bipedal because, well, I guess 2 reasons. One, you can always make the dig at Godzilla if you have a upright theropod-looking dinosaur that gets defeated. But also, 2, it'd be too similar to Bargon and Jiger if it was another quadrupedal lizard thing. He enters the movie kind of abruptly, without any explanation, because Gamera has to have something to fight. At first, we don't see him. There's sort of like a Jaws-esque scene of him taking out the survivors of the ship that he attacked.
Yeah, but I want to ask one question.
Yeah.
The beginning of the movie, Gamera sacrifices itself, and they have 33 years of quiet, right?
Yes.
So is this whole thing, did Gamera somehow try to replicate itself to come back 33 years later knowing there'd be this second attack? Is that their intention?
Probably. There's a whole mystical aspect in terms of knowledge. That's something that he's probably getting from the Heisei movies. Even the scenario of being swarmed by a bunch of Gyaos in a desperate fight to save humanity, that is from the ending of the Heisei series. Granted, it's a lot more Gyaos and a lot larger Gamera. This Gamera's like 35 meters. Avant Gamera is the official name for the backstory flashback Gamera. Not sure why they decided that. It's a cool design. But in terms of sending out the blinking light, in terms of the kids instinctively knowing what to do, Gamera probably also has that knowledge. We don't see Gamera eat in this movie, which implies that he's sustained by some other force, and the other force in the Heisei movies would be Mana.
I didn't notice that, you're right.
Well, that's sort of like, I didn't notice it until this rewatch, but that's something that most Boy and his ex stories have, is trying to feed the thing, and this completely circumvents that because he doesn't need to eat. He sort of is this kind of higher being. The 33 years thing, it's kind of funny. I want to highlight it.
It reminds me of It, okay, to be honest.
That's 27 years?
Is it? Okay.
I do not remember. We should double check that, actually. The 33 years is because Gamera is both father and son. The son is Gamera, and the father is Gamera because he's the son of Gamera. Mm-hmm. And he's a savior of humanity and a friend to all children. And 33 years... That's how old Jesus was when he did his ministry thing.
Oh, you should write something
So between
about
the
this.
miracles of the birth and the miracles of the thing, it's probably not intentional. It's probably not intentional. It's just it's a funny coincidence.
My favorite scene in the movie, and I like it when you have long, prolonged scenes that work, when all these kids are doing like a handoff.
We'll get there.
Okay,
We'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get there.
Okay.
So first, we have this whimsical, how do you say, slice of life character study of this young boy keeping this turtle secret. It's all very fun. There's some darker aspects in terms of Mai's impending surgery and possible mortality, and the fact that Toru is mourning his mother. But there's also a sort of reconciliation, a reconstruction, a healing that comes from this in terms of Todo, because Todo helps Toru to cope with this, especially the separation anxiety. His mother died of a car accident, getting hit by a car and all that stuff. And so it's very interesting that one of the first things that Toru does with Todo is save him from getting hit by a car. When he tries to put the flying turtle back, Todo follows him, is in the road, so Toru runs in there and saves Todo from getting hit by a car, and then it's a serious thing, but then he also laughs, and he's bonding with the turtle over this stuff, healing from his wound, his character wound, as the thing goes. Then Zedus comes in and dials stuff up a lot, because Zedus actually is a man-eating monster, and in this children's movie, Zedus' full introduction, the first time we see Zedus' body, he comes ashore, we just hear the screams, and then we see a bunch of people huddled together, and then we see Zedus' head dipping down. Again, it's a kid's movie, but then you see the blood in Zedus' mouth, and one of the characters, one of Toru's friends, is directly in danger of getting eaten by Zedus, this man-eating monster. The stakes dial up, but it still feels like the same movie. So Toru's father is there, he saves the other kid, and as Zedus is about to eat them, Toto comes in giant size and fights Zedus. A lot of people complain that he doesn't really use his flight and his fire breath in this fight until the very end to resolve this first fight. And I don't really see why they think that, because it's heavily implied that there's an energy kind of thing with the red pearl that he needs in order to do that. He can only do the flame breath at the end of the fight as a last resort, and it ends the fight for both of them. He's exhausted after that and has to be resuscitated by the military. Not the military.
It's kind of fun how the military takes them over, you know.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm jumping around here. The point being that Zedus is not a world-ending threat by any means. It's the small stakes, the way he goes after individual people, that makes him a threat here. Because Gamera is a newborn in this movie, so he's fighting what amounts to be this large, insurmountable threat for him. But because he's a baby, this is a starter villain, so he's not actually that. He wouldn't destroy the world if he kept going. He just would devastate regions of Japan, cities of Japan, and I like that for the stakes. Then Mai goes into surgery, and sort of corresponding to this, the government has some kind of task force since their kaiju thing was dissolved. They take Gamera, try and study him, try and get him to full power in order to fight Zedus, because Zedus has to recover from the fireball to the face, and then Zedus will almost certainly be back attacking. Once Zedus comes back, Gamera wakes back up, and Mai gets out of surgery, but she still has the red pearl that Toto's going to need in order to defeat Zedus. And so then we get what is honestly the heart of the movie. Do you want to get into that scene now?
Well, it's just when did Toro realize he needs that pearl to help?
I think it's a basic assumption. You found it with the pearl. The pearl has been tied to Gamera this entire time in terms of how it's existed. And also there's just some kind of knowledge that kids have in these movies. They just know.
So there's some kind of connection to Gamera and his kids, right?
Yeah.
You know, I want you to tell most about this, because I watch all these movies, but I'm not the scholar of Cage you are, okay? So I just told you previously what my favorite scene was, because I thought it was well done.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Well, you describe the scene for a second. Set the stage, if you will.
People are running away from the monster in the fight, and the kids are running the other way, and they're being stopped occasionally, but they hand off the pearl to get, okay?
Yeah. So Mai has it. She knows that Toto needs it. So this little girl comes up to her and says, "For Toto?" This is for Toto. So she passes off the jewel, the pearl, whatever it is called, and then this little girl runs, passes off to another child. They all say, "For Toto." At this point, Toru has been trying to find Toto, and his friends are with him, but Toru's dad comes, tells the kids to go to the hospital. They get lost immediately, and so they end up being the last link of that pass off. A kid finds them, or they find that kid, I should say, and they bring that back to Toru. He tells Gamera not to kill himself this time, and tosses it into Toto's mouth. At this point, Zedus has been climbing up the building after lodging Toto into it. Sorry, I should have explained that. They're fighting, and Toto's losing. And at one point, Zedus, the masochistic person that he is, tosses Toto into a building and then climbs up the other building next to it to briefly puncture the side while he's being restrained. He is Jesus. No, sorry. Puncture the side of Toto and climbs up the building, then jumps to the other building, climbs down to slap him with a tail and then pull him out of the thing. That would be a contrivance, except that it's characterizing that he's not just there to fight Toto. Toto's in the way. He's there to destroy the city. So I think it works perfectly fine. The issue with Zedus is that his origins are never explained. He shows up without any context, and guidebook materials indicate that he was mutated by eating a Gyaos corpse, but those died in 1973. There's not going to be a corpse left in 2006. That's the only issue with the movie, by the way. Otherwise, I think it's a flawless script. So anyway, sorry, he does the thing in the mouth, and then they're ready to fight, and Gamera can fly and fight with the fireball. He has a large fireball he sends out. But that scene of the little kids, it's the idea that other films have shown Gamera as the friend to all children, but this film shows that all children can be the friend to Gamera.
Good point. Yeah.
That's the heart of the movie, because the title Gamera the Brave, what do you think of that title?
Well, I I mean, Gamera the Brave is just a title you can probably tick to every Gamera movie if you wanted to. But it doesn't bother me.
Yeah, but that's not the original title. The original title is Little Braves Gamera. There's only one Gamera in the movie, so the Little Braves must be those kids that are
good
little
point.
and brave.
I want to get back to that scene though, because I like scenes that have motion going for a long time and bringing it to a conclusion. Like, this is, you're going to think these analogies are ridiculous, but two of the great scenes of all time were once in Goodfellas, where Henry Hill, who's a young mobster, already takes his date through the back of a restaurant, through the entire location of the back part of the restaurant, saying hi to everyone, going through the cooking and everything. And then he comes in and the maitre d' sees him and brings him in, has the people bring him a perfect table and everything. It's just done. It's a perfect scene. Another one is Rocky at the end, where the fight's over and Adrian's trying to meander her way and fight her way through the crowds to get to Rocky. Those are the kind of scenes I really like in films, because they take a lot of hard work and dedication and practice to get it right. And I thought the scene of the kids rushing to rescue Gamera was along those lines.
Yeah. It is, there's scenes where they're stopped by a fence, which seems realistic, and then there's someone reaches through the fence. There's scenes where a guard or a policeman holds one kid back so the other kid runs past with the thing. A continuous motion, you know?
But funny, this movie didn't make a lot of money.
It didn't, and that... Okay, I'm going to get into that in a second, but first I'm going to say, I forgot to mention this, but at one point Toru voices that his worry over Toto when Toto isn't with him is sort of like what his mother must have felt with him, and that's when Toru realizes that he does believe in an afterlife. It's sort of a minor thing, but like that is the payoff for that. Anyway, back into that. So the movie underperformed, and it's the 12th Gamera movie. There have only been 12 Gamera movies.
But the TV series recently, did it play off on it?
Oh, it did. Do you remember? It's been over a year since we watched it.
Yeah.
Do you remember the character Joe in that show? His family's backstory is the backstory of Toru. They even mentioned Toru.
That's what I was thinking when I was watching it.
But in that version, Toru dies, so it's even more tragic. Not only the mother, but also Toru in that version dies. So Joe and his father are left as even more broken than this family unit was, which feeds into all that stuff. I don't want to spoil too much about Gamera Rebirth, but it plays off of that really interestingly in terms of Boku and Joe, in terms of embodying the Toru thing.
I think it didn't do well because we were reaching an era where they were starting to move to more adult stories for the kaiju. I mean, we were just several years away from the American version of Godzilla coming out. Maybe it just was, it's a great movie. Maybe if it been released 20 years earlier with that kind of sophistication, it might have been a super hit.
It got less profitable over time to make these kaiju movies, especially in the early 2000s, because we have Godzilla's movies to compare with. Like, again, so Millennium Series I mentioned at the start of this, that is starting in 1999, because the 1998 Godzilla movie came out and
Do we even have to talk about that?
Well, yes, because Toho was like, we can do it better, as they already had demonstrated, but they wanted to again, so they had their Millennium String. That's 1998's Godzilla 2000. That's a bit confusing, but yeah. Then Godzilla vs. Megaguirus, then Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monster Lord Attack.
Joe Toho? Is it called Toho?
Toho, yeah.
Tojo or Toho?
Toho.
Toho didn't really have much to prove after the 98 Godzilla. They didn't really step up their game. They just made their movies. Now, granted, they were a little bit better. But when they came out with Millennium stuff, Tojo had to put out something great. And they did with Godzilla -1. Okay.
Yeah. And Shin Godzilla, though I haven't watched that one yet. That's the only gap. I've watched Shin Ultraman, weirdly enough. Not Shin Godzilla yet, though.
Well, you
Going back to the Millennium series. GMK, Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters, All Out Attack from 2001, and Godzilla against Mechagodzilla are two of the best in the entire series, in my opinion. So they stepped up their game to an extent. The special effects were actually worse in the Millennium movies than in the Heisei and Showa. It's kind of funny. So they had like 5 or 6 movies, climaxing in Godzilla Final Wars, which was the 50th anniversary celebration in 2004, which I think underperformed. Also a bad movie. It was the fan service in the worst way. So we had all the monsters coming back, but they just had very quick bouts, most of them terrible redesigns. They didn't do anything. It didn't feel like an old Godzilla movie. Gamera Rebirth 2 years later feels like an old Gamera movie, but with improvements in the sensibilities and the special effects and all that stuff. But diminishing returns on those Godzilla movies, I think 2005's King Kong did pretty well.
Yeah, well,
But
it was a big hit. Peter
That,
Jackson
that was
riding
the
tail
exception to the rule, it turned
of
out.
the
So
Lord of the Rings.
it was less profitable, but also I think there's weird rights stuff that were tied in terms of like technical and other stuff aspects. Gamera's roar doesn't appear in Gamera the Brave. His iconic elephant screech roar
Yeah.
isn't in the movie, and that turns a lot of people off to the movie when they realize that. But also, Zedus and Toto, they don't have much in the way of like merchandise and marketing, which is very strange because up until that point, they've been very consistent in terms of releasing that stuff. And as we know now, DVD sales and toy sales can keep franchises going, like Transformers, and the rougher parts of the MonsterVerse were kept afloat by merchandise and home media sales. I think there's some weird rights things tied up in terms of not being able to use his roar and not being able to make stuff for Zedus and Toto after the fact. Like even in the recent merchandise, they skipped over those movies. Zedus has not appeared again in any Gamera movies because there haven't been any. He also didn't appear in Gamera Rebirth. They had the new version of Gyaos, S-Gyaos, that had the frill, was it? Did I say frill?
May think that Zedus was a bomb, all right?
He's one of the best monsters in the thing. He's one of the best monsters. Okay, it's fine.
I don't disagree with you. I'm just talking about how people react to things. You know?
I think there's a bunch of different factors that led to this movie killing the Gamera series.
You know, look what happened to Poochie in The Simpsons. Okay.
That's a good analogy. I like Poochie.
No, it's not a good analogy. It's just a joke.
I liked Poochie, though. I think he should have stuck around.
I think he was the most annoying thing in the world. So what more do you want to add about Gamera the Brave?
What more do you want to add about Gamera the Brave? I think it's the best one overall. You don't have to think that. I think it's the best Gamera
Because
movie.
if Steve Stones has
overall.
said, do not say, you don't have to think that. State your mind, okay?
You don't have to. I'm not going to force you to think that. If you think that the Heisei series is better, that's fine. If you think that the original is better, I want what drugs you're on. But if you think that Gamera versus Gyaos or Jiger or Giron is better, then fine. Then that's fair.
I think I reviewed Gamera versus Giron one time.
Yeah.
One of my 300-word reviews. Okay.
It's fine. It's also interesting. They could have chosen to title this movie "Son of Gamera," because they're son of
That's not a bad
Godzilla
idea,
and son of
yeah.
Kong. But they didn't do that. I don't know why.
Okay.
That's probably everything we have to say right now.
All right, well, we're Plan 9 Crunch, where we're on top of Keiju and many other things. And Plan 9 Crunch, subscribe to us at YouTube. Geez, we must have 150 or so shows now on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
And we're occasionally on TikTok, and we are on, what is it? Plan 9 Crunch podcast and blog at Facebook, and plan9crunch.com, which is a conventional blog. Thank you for your time, and that's a wrap.